My name is Clara Bennett. I am 35 years old. 18 years ago, when I was just 17, my parents stood at our front door, handed me a notarized document that legally severed all familial ties, and told me to leave. They didn't ask questions. They didn't offer help. They simply chose their reputation over their own child. For nearly 2 decades, I was a ghost in my own family. To their friends, their donors, and their country club peers, I had gracefully relocated to Europe. The truth was far quieter, and far crueler. Then, last Tuesday, they appeared on my porch. Arthur and Evelyn Bennett stood there in immaculate wool coats, smiling with the polished ease of people who have spent a lifetime curating perfection. Between them rested a leather portfolio. Inside was a blank check for $300,000. Their request was simple, and utterly absurd. They wanted me to bring my son to their foundation's 25th anniversary gala. They had spent months boasting to 300 elite donors about their brilliant, tech-savvy grandson. They had constructed an entire legacy narrative around a boy who would validate their social standing. They just made one critical error. They offered me $300,000 for a grandson that doesn't exist. They had no idea what I was about to do at their anniversary gala. I wasn't going to bring a fictional child to salvage their image. I was going to bring the daughter they tried to bury, and the archived evidence they never thought I'd keep. Let me take you back to the night they decided I was no longer worth their name. To understand why a $300,000 check felt like an insult, you have to understand the Bennetts. On paper, we were the blueprint of success. My father, Arthur, built a prestigious corporate law practice from a single downtown office. My mother, Evelyn, didn't just serve on charity boards, she chaired them. They measured human value in tax deductions, donor lists, and social capital. I was never part of that calculation. I was the surprise. Born 6 years after my mother decided her family was complete. While my older siblings were groomed for elite circles, I learned early how to make myself small. Family portraits were carefully cropped. Dinner conversations revolved around their achievements. I learned that approval in that house was a currency I couldn't afford. My father had a maxim he repeated at every dinner party: reputation takes 20 years to build and 5 minutes to destroy. He said it like a warning. I didn't know then that he was also writing my eviction notice. I was 17 when I found out I was pregnant. I had Marcus, the boy who worked at the local garage, who looked at me like I was worth remembering. I thought my parents would be angry, but I also thought they were my parents. I thought blood mattered. I was wrong, I told them at Sunday dinner. When I finally said the words, the silverware stopped. My mother's fork clattered against her china. My father didn't blink. Who is the father? His voice wasn't angry. It was cold. Calculating. Is it someone from our circle? Someone we can manage? I told him the truth. Marcus worked at an auto shop. The silence that followed lasted exactly 10 seconds. I counted, then my father stood. We will not allow you to destroy 2 decades of standing for a moment of poor judgment. If you keep it, you are no longer a Bennett. My mother didn't argue. She simply opened the front door. Pack a bag. By 9 that night, I was standing on the porch in the November rain, a single duffel bag at my feet. I looked up. Julian and Sophie were watching from the second-floor window. Neither of them moved. 3 houses down, Mrs. Higgins, our elderly neighbor, pulled back her curtains. She saw me standing there. She saw the taillights of my father's car disappear down the street. She didn't come out that night. She told me years later she regretted it every day. But she did something else. She kept her security camera running. She archived the footage. She kept the record. I called Marcus from a payphone. 20 minutes later, his truck pulled up. He wrapped me in a jacket and held me while I finally let myself cry. That night, I learned the hardest lesson of my life. My father always said, reputation takes 20 years to build and 5 minutes to destroy. He just didn't know I'd be the 5 minutes. And he certainly didn't know that the girl he threw into the rain would spend the next 18 years learning how to control the narrative. The first 2 years were a masterclass in survival. Marcus and I rented a basement apartment that smelled of damp concrete and cheap detergent. I finished my GED, then enrolled in night classes while Marcus worked double shifts at the garage. When Maya was born, she didn't just arrive, she gave me a reason to breathe. I learned to stretch $1 until it screamed, to patch clothes, to turn library books into textbooks. But survival wasn't enough. I needed leverage. That's when I discovered my gift. Growing up in a house where every word was a landmine had taught me how to read a room before I could read a novel. I knew how to de-escalate, how to reframe a narrative, how to make chaos look like strategy. I started taking on small freelance gigs, managing PR for local startups, handling crisis communications for business owners who'd made public mistakes. I didn't have a pedigree, but I had instinct. And in crisis management, instinct is currency. By 25, I had incorporated my own firm. I didn't use the Bennett name. I registered it professionally as Vance Strategies, adopting a different surname as a shield. Clients didn't care about my lineage, they cared that I could make their problems disappear. I built a reputation for discretion, precision, and unshakable calm. By 30, we had a corner office, a team of 12, and contracts with mid-market corporations. Maya grew up surrounded by media kits and strategy decks. Learning early that perception is just reality waiting to be shaped. She's 18 now, a college freshman with her mother's spine and a fierce, unapologetic voice. We never hid our past from each other, but we kept it hidden from the public. No interviews about my childhood. No social media deep dives. Just results. I built a $5 million empire from the ruins of the life they threw away. I thought that was the end of the story. I was wrong. Because success doesn't make you invisible to people who only value you when you're useful. It just makes you a more valuable prop. And last week, my parents decided it was time to cash in. The black Bentley idling at my curb wasn't a visit, it was an audit. Arthur and Evelyn stepped out with the synchronized precision of people who've never had to wait for a door to open. They didn't knock. They announced themselves. 10 days. That's all the notice they gave. The Bennett Family Foundation's 25th anniversary gala was scheduled for the following Saturday, a black tie event at the Grandview Hotel. 300 donors. 5,000 livestream viewers. And a glaring hole in their carefully scripted narrative. My mother spoke first, her voice wrapped in that practiced, conciliatory tone she reserves for boardroom negotiations. "We know about your son, Clara." She didn't phrase it as a question. It was an assertion. "We've told the membership about him. About the scholarship, the tech innovations, the legacy he represents." I stared at her. The silence stretched. My father opened his leather briefcase and placed a single sheet of paper on my coffee table. A blank check. Pre-printed with the foundation's routing number. $300,000, he said, as if discussing a vendor invoice. "You bring him to the gala. You stay for the toast. You smile for the photographs. Then you return to your life." The sheer audacity of it nearly broke my composure. 20 years of silence. 20 years of legal severance. And now, a transactional bribe to parade a fictional child through a charity stream. "Who told you I have a son?" I asked, my voice dangerously even. "The article," my father waved a hand, dismissing the years of erasure with a flick of his wrist. "The business profile. It mentioned your child. You've built something respectable." We assumed. Before he could finish, footsteps echoed from the hallway. Maya appeared at the top of the stairs, a psychology textbook tucked under her arm, her hair pulled into a careless knot. She looked exactly like what she was, an 18-year-old who'd spent her life building resilience instead of receiving it. My mother's posture stiffened. Her eyes cycled through confusion, calculation, and something dangerously close to panic. "Who is this?" "This is Maya," I said, stepping slightly forward. "My daughter." "Your granddaughter." Arthur's jaw tightened. The lawyer in him instantly began recalibrating the narrative. "A granddaughter," he said slowly, testing the weight of the new variable. "That works. We can adjust the messaging. We'll say you were studying abroad. Recently returned." Maya's gaze locked onto theirs, her expression unreadable but her voice steady. "You want me to lie to 300 people about my entire existence?" They wanted a prop for their photo op. Instead, they got the truth. And I was done letting them write the script. After they left, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I went to my office closet and unlocked the fireproof safe I hadn't opened in nearly a decade. Inside lay the architecture of my erasure. The original notarized document, Severance of Familial Ties. Dated November 14, 2006. Signed by Arthur and Evelyn Bennett, witnessed, stamped. It stated clearly that I forfeited all inheritance rights, and that the family bore no legal or moral obligation to me, or any dependents thereof. I photographed every page. Uploaded them to encrypted cloud storage. Made 3 physical backups. Evidence isn't just paper, it's leverage. Next, I called Mrs. Higgins. At 78, her voice was still sharp. Still warm. When I explained what Arthur and Evelyn wanted, she didn't hesitate. "I kept the tapes, Clara," she said. "Old habit. I document everything." 20 minutes later, an email arrived. A grainy, time-stamped video file. November 14, 2006. 9:17 p.m. A 17-year-old girl in a soaked sweater, standing alone on a porch as a black sedan pulled away. The timestamp was undeniable. The address was visible. It was the smoking gun that proved they didn't just distance themselves, they actively discarded me. Before I could archive it, my phone rang. Unknown Oregon number. I almost declined it. "Clara?" The voice was deeper, weathered. "Julian. My brother." I hadn't heard it in 18 years. "I know I have no right to call," he said, breathless. "But you need to know what you're walking into. The gala isn't just a dinner. Pastor Davies arranged a full live stream. 300 people in the room. 5,000 watching online. They're using it to launch the new foundation initiative. They want a unified family moment." He paused. "Caroline and I will be there. If you decide to go, you won't be alone." I looked at the severance papers, then at the security footage on my screen. The clock was ticking. 10 days. They wanted a live stream to show off their perfect family. I was going to give them one they'd never forget. The Grandview Hotel ballroom was a masterpiece of curated opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over 300 guests in tailored suits and evening gowns. At the center of the raised stage, my father stood behind a polished podium, a single camera tracking his every gesture. The red live indicator on the side monitor blinked steadily. 5,000 people were watching from home. For 25 years, Arthur's voice boomed through the speakers. The Bennett Foundation has stood for one principle: family. Legacy. The unshakable bond that holds us together. I adjusted my black blazer and stepped through the double doors. Maya walked beside me, her posture straight, her eyes fixed forward. The murmur started instantly. It rippled through the room like wind through dry leaves. Heads turned. Whispers collided. "Is that her?" The daughter from the article. I could see the live stream chat scrolling rapidly on the monitor near the stage. My father's smile faltered. He squinted into the lights, trying to maintain his composure. I didn't run. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight up the 3 steps to the platform. The camera operator, trained to follow movement, kept me in frame. I stopped beside the podium, reached out, and gently took the microphone from my father's hand. He was too stunned to resist. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice steady, amplified across the silent ballroom. "My name is Clara Bennett. For those of you who don't know me, and many of you don't, I'm Arthur and Evelyn's youngest daughter. The one they told you moved to Europe 18 years ago." The silence was absolute. "I didn't move to Europe," I continued, keeping my tone measured. "On November 14, 2006, my parents discovered I was 17 and pregnant. That same night, they handed me a notarized document severing all familial ties, opened the front door, and told me to leave. They chose their reputation over their child." I reached into my portfolio and held up the legal document, turning it toward the camera. "This is the original. Signed, witnessed, and mailed to me 3 days later to ensure I understood my place." Arthur stepped forward, his voice strained. "Clara, this isn't the time." "When is the time, Dad?" I held the mic steady. "When you're offering $300,000 to parade a fictional grandson at a livestream charity event? You read a magazine profile, assumed I had a son, and invented a legacy to protect your image. But you don't get to rewrite history for a photo op." I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped the screen, and connected it to the ballroom's audiovisual system. Mrs. Higgins kept the security footage from that night. 18 years old, but the timestamp is clear. "Let's watch." The main screen behind us flickered. Grainy footage played. A 17-year-old girl standing in the rain. A single suitcase. A black sedan pulling away into the dark. The room inhaled as one. Julian and Sophie stood up from the front table. They didn't shout. They simply nodded toward the stage. "She's telling the truth," Julian said, his voice carrying through the quiet. We were there. We watched from the window. We stayed silent. That was our failure. The live stream chat was a blur of shock and solidarity. I looked directly into the camera lens, then back at my parents. Their polished facade had cracked, revealing the calculation underneath. They expected a scene. They expected tears, demands, a lawsuit. I didn't scream. I just handed the microphone to my daughter and let her introduce herself to the grandparents who erased her. The fallout didn't wait for morning. By midnight, the GALA clip had been shared across every major platform. By dawn, 3 major donors publicly withdrew their pledges, citing irreconcilable values. Within a week, Arthur resigned from 2 charity boards and stepped down as foundation chair. Evelyn's country club membership was quietly suspended. They had spent decades building a fortress of reputation. I hadn't fired a single shot. I had simply turned on the lights. They wanted a prop to polish their legacy. I gave them a mirror. And in the reflection, they finally had to face the cost of their own choices. I didn't file a lawsuit. I didn't demand a share of the trust. Revenge is loud, expensive, and often leaves you just as hollow as the people you're fighting. Instead, I chose something far more permanent, a boundary. I sent one formal letter to their attorney. It stated clearly that any future contact required my written consent, and that any public mention of my daughter would trigger the immediate release of the archived footage to national media. Silence is powerful, but documented consequences are absolute. Julian and Sophie reached out a month later. Not with excuses, but with accountability. We rebuilt slowly. Coffee, then dinner, then holidays. Maya finally got the uncle and aunt who showed up when it mattered, not just when it was convenient. Looking back, I realize my parents' greatest mistake wasn't kicking me out. It was assuming I would spend my life begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for me. I didn't need their validation to know my value. Setting boundaries isn't revenge, it's survival. And sometimes, the family you choose is the one that finally lets you breathe.